Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Test. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Mic check 1 2.
Mic check 1 2.
Good afternoon. The Committee on Rules and the Committee on General Government Operations and Federal, Foreign, and Regional Affairs now convenes its hearing. For the record, today is Friday, May 12, 2017. Time is now 2:01 in the afternoon. In accordance with the Open Government Law, public notices for today's proceedings were provided to senators, stakeholders, and our local media. A 5-day notice was provided on Friday, May 5, 2017, and a 48-hour notice was provided on Wednesday, May 10, 2017. The notice was also published in the Pacific Daily News and the Guam Legislature website. The Committee on Rules will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following items. First on the agenda, we have Bill number 60-34, COR, introduced by Senator Fernando Barcinas Esteves and Senator Tommy Morrison, an act to amend sections 1105, 1106, 1112, 1118A, and 1119, all of Chapter 1, and to add a new Chapter 15 of Title 2 Guam Code Annotated, to amend sections 4102, 4105, 4403G, and 4702, all of Chapter 4, to amend sections 5101A of Chapter 5, to amend sections 6102, 6103, 6302, 6304, and to add a new E to section 6303, all of Chapter 6, Title 4 Guam Code Annotated, and to repeal Chapter 20 of Title 17 Guam Code Annotated relative to the Citizens Legislature Act. The Committee on General Government Operations and Federal, Foreign, and Regional Affairs will hear and accept testimony, both oral and written, on the following items. Bill number 72-34, introduced by myself, Senator Nicolas, an act to add a new section 22438 to Article 4, Chapter 22, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring that executive branch agencies of the Government of Guam amortize payments of municipal leases into equal monthly installments throughout the fiscal year, except when such amortization schedule would cause a violation of an indenture such that it would negatively impact the credit rating of the Government of Guam. We also have on the agenda 2 resolutions, both introduced by myself, Senator Nicolas. The first is Resolution 76-34, relative to respectfully requesting that Congresswoman Madeline Z. Bordallo pursue via the United States Treasury and the Department of Interior a payment schedule for Section 30 reimbursements that will improve the Government of Guam's cash flow position by amortizing such payments in quarterly installments over the fiscal year, beginning with the third quarter of fiscal year 2017. Resolution number 107-34 would establish a Wheels to Work program to provide Guam Regional Transit Authority bus passes to individuals who are unemployed and are actively seeking work, subject to availability of funds, paid by voluntary contributions from senatorial office budgets, and to direct the Executive Director of Legislature to establish policies and procedures for the program. I'd like to begin our public hearing today by recognizing my colleagues who are present. To my far right is our Vice Chair of the Committee on General Government Operations, Federal, Foreign, and Regional Affairs, Senator Mary Torres. To my immediate right is our Majority Leader, Senator Tom Adam. To my immediate left is Senator Fernando Esteves. To his immediate left is Senator Frank Uggan. And to his immediate left is Senator Tommy Morrison. We'll go ahead and begin our hearing with the Committee on Rules hearing Bill number 60-34. We will go ahead and entertain any individuals who have signed up to testify, and I will at the time yield the floor to Senator Esteves, the prime sponsor of the legislation, for his opening statement. Senator.
At first, I'd like to thank the chairman for hosting this today, and I'd also like to thank my other colleagues who are in attendance, and most importantly to the public for your testimony, both submitted and any oral testimony we've yet to hear today. Bill 60 summarizes the Citizens Legislature Act. It's always been my belief that in a representative democracy that we're in, there should be representation from the butcher, the baker, and the sanahi maker. And furthermore, I think it's important to celebrate these different experiences within our government. The Citizens Legislature Act would prove to ensure that we have more representation and more ideas to solve the complex problems we have. I see nothing wrong with an active nurse advocating for healthcare changes, or a working doctor, or a working teacher, somebody in the construction field who could speak as to the current issues facing our people and facing the public and facing the island. What this bill also allows is to treat legislative responsibilities as a part-time senator as a civic duty. It stands to reduce the pay to a stipend of $12,000 per year, and it also allows protections for them to serve. With the part-time legislature, we would get more participation, is my belief, and that's been the core of my belief with regards to government and legislative reform, is to have more representation and have more competition and more people representing a vast and diverse array of thoughts and ideas. I think it's the truest way to solve the current problems we have today. So again, I'd like to thank my colleague and the chairman for having this hearing today, and I stand ready myself, and also like to thank Senator Morrison for co-sponsoring this bill. And we stand ready to answer any questions and engage you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. Just for the record, we do have written testimony that's been transmitted, and it will be included in the committee report. We have written testimony from Mr. Ken Leon Guerrero, written testimony from the Guam Chamber of Commerce, written testimony from Mr. Benny Panala, and written testimony from Mr. Peter Talahi. The committee will go ahead and continue to accept testimony if anyone wants to transmit any in writing to senatornicolas@gmail.com. Right now, we do have only one individual who signed up to testify orally, and that is Mr. Benny Panala on bill number 60-34. Sir, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chairman Michael Nicolas and Honorable Senators. My name is Benny Panala, an officer of the Republican Party of Guam. I am here before you today in support of this bill. Over the course of 2 years, we have heard the concerns from senators about the adoption of the Hay Study. Despite the Guam legislature salary being consistent with the national average for U.S. territorial governments, many in the legislature still believe that we should roll back the pay of Guam senators back to the salary of 2 decades ago at $55,000. As a father and a grandfather looking to the future for the next generation, I find this problematic. While this may make for great politics, it translates into poor public policy. Doing this will only diminish the talent pool of qualified Guamanians who run for these offices. In turn, it will mean that the best and the brightest Guamanians will not be representing our children and working families at the Guam legislature, as you will be paying the position less than the national average of U.S. territorial governments, capping out our citizens who may wish to run for the position of senator. If the legislature salaries are rolled back, our leaders must make sure that the position and salary continues to attract a wide cross-section of our community to serve here. That being said, I support this bill as it will cure this concern. Democracy was intended for citizens to have representation and a voice in the legislature. A part-time legislature is aligned with this intent and will ensure that the butcher, the baker, and the businessman can continue to run for office without shuttering their voices out due to substandard pay. Thank you, Sidus Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Panala. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Panala?
I do, Mr. Speaker, Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Esteves.
that's okay. Mr. Panala, thank you for your testimony today. I think it's a greater issue that I bring forward with this legislation. It's not even necessarily about the pay. I think the ability for somebody, more importantly, not to leave something that they might have put years of blood, sweat, and tears into, either as a business or as an employee in a different sector, or even giving up their retirement that they've been building into, I think is something important in the long run. It's not just about the compensation, it's about the understanding that there are many qualified individuals out there with lives, and that they do have a responsibility to keep their mortgage paid and different things like that without having to choose between potentially losing their house or their desire to serve. So I think it's just the intent of the legislation is to realize through statute that even politicians are people too, or even the senators are people too. But again, thank you for your support and your testimony today.
Thank you, Senator. Just a real quick comment. I gave earlier testimony concerning the pay for senators. And again, I will emphasize my belief that I truly believe that the work you guys are doing for Guam is very, very honorable. It takes a lot of good people like yourselves to get up here and do this. It's not an easy job to run a campaign, to take care of your families. I don't believe that your pay should have been reduced. And again, I testified a while back about that. If anything else, I would rather pay you more so that so that we can keep the good people passing good laws, passing good measures. I'm concerned about the talent pool that we're attracting. Now, when you talk about pay, any company, any business will tell you, you're going to pay for what you get. And if you want good people, you pay them for what they're worth. That's their value. And I believe our people here in Guam value you as senators. I do. We may not agree all the time 100% on issues, and that's fine. That's how democracy works. But the work that you do is so important. It pushes Guam forward. 20 years ago, Guam was not what it is today. But because of good legislation, we are here with the next generation of Chamorros, Guamanians, who will be looking for a job and opportunities, who want probably to take your jobs up there. I like to pay them what they're worth. We've come a long way here on Guam. And again, if we are going to a part-time legislature, then it's in line with the pay that you're going to be reducing. And I agree with that. So on behalf of the Republican Party of Guam, we support this bill.
Senator Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Pinalla, and the fact that you're here testifying as an officer of the Republican Party.
Yes.
I take note of that. Now, I was listening closely to what you were saying. I thought maybe I missed something. Like, so what does the pay level have to do with the concept of a part-time legislature? And so maybe if you can share your thoughts about what do you think about a part-time legislature versus a full-time legislature, and so maybe if you can speak on that, regardless of what the pay level is.
Again, I will emphasize that my thoughts and my feelings about the part-time legislature. If you're reducing your salary, then yes, a part-time legislature makes sense. You all have lives, you all have bills to pay, and you have families to take care of. So a part-time legislature and an individual who has another job in the private or public sector could make the difference with that extra job. But if you're talking about a full-time legislature, I would like to see you guys get paid a lot higher than what you're being paid right now.
So what I hear you saying then is that if the salary levels is going to be reduced for the senators, then
A part-time legislature makes sense.
Therefore, the senators should work less hours to be commensurate to the reduced level of pay. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now I understand where you're coming from about supporting a part-time legislature more so to be commensurate with the reduced pay level. But it still does not speak to the question of, do you think that this third branch of government can continue to provide the policy guidance that our government needs when it is operating on a part-time basis?
Where I'm coming from is looking at the talent pool. If you go to a part-time legislature, who will be serving in the capacity? Will it be you? Will it be someone else? And who would that person be? Will it be somebody with, a good education, who has the ability to make great decisions for our people? Or will it be somebody not of that caliber, of less caliber? And what kind of legislation would that be? And how would that affect Guam? So if we go to a part-time legislature, I hope that we pull in the highest caliber of individuals to come serve our people, just like yourselves.
One last question then is, so can you tell me then, in your opinion, do you think that the work that this legislature does is a full-time undertaking, or could we do it on maybe a couple of days a week?
I can tell you, from being in politics a long time, your jobs are 24/7.
Thank you very much.
Senator Castro, I understand you have some questions. I'm sorry, Senator Torres?
Thank you. Mr. Pinalla, as an officer of the Republican Party of Guam, you're well aware of the reporting requirements that are required of us by law, candidates, for disclosure of campaign contributions, financial disclosures, and the like. And, it's so stringent that as soon as you receive $100 in cash, you're supposed to report that individual's name and address and the amount that they contributed to the Guam Election Commission. So under the scenario of a part-time legislature, you have a person who could have his own business interests or work for someone, be under the employment of someone. And yet, under that scenario, and in looking at this bill, there's nothing that addresses the reporting requirements of a private business interest. And does that concern you in any way? Because one of the precautions that we have in our government is that we're always looking for conflicts of interest in areas where people are abusing their authority and their power and manipulating it to their personal gain. So if you have a scenario where you either own your own business and are yourself a part-time senator, or a business owner, large or small, in any field, maybe a field that even contracts with the government on a regular basis, how do you reconcile defining whether that person, or ascertaining whether that person has a conflict of interest and is profiting from their position as a senator? Because I can't reconcile it, and as an officer of the party, I'd be very interested in your point of view.
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Torres. That's a great question. As we all know, conflict of interest is a very, very tight rope for us public officials. We have inserted so many legislation and guidelines to the respect of transparency. When we're transparent with our finances, when we're transparent with our business operations, we're transparent with our introduction of bills and our business dealings, I think people can make that judgment for themselves. In terms of what the laws and guidelines should be, I would leave that radiation up to you to decide. But I would say we allow people to, if we go to a part-time legislature, allow them to have a business or be employed. They still are people. They still need to earn a living and pay bills. They're no different. You're no different than the rest of the community in that aspect. The difference really is how much of personal time you have compared to a regular citizen. Most of you senators know you have very little personal time. You are engaged not only in the private functions and public functions of the community, but also family. And it takes a lot of your time. You're out shopping, people are coming up to you and talking to you. You're at a restaurant, people are coming up and talking to you. And so as senators, you are fully engaged in this community. But if you're asking what do we do and how do we resolve it, again, I think the best approach would be our current approach, and that would be through transparency. If we need to introduce additional laws to protect that, I'm sure that this body would be able to do so.
That's my concern, is this legislation doesn't address that. I don't believe, and I think that what it does is it just leaves that door wide open, because you and I know that we do not use this position for our personal interests. We do not use it to advance our interests, or most especially to inappropriately or criminally profit from it.
Correct.
And that's the point that I'm making, is short of you put a person in a position that has no checks and is beholden to somebody who's providing food on their table, that, and I'm just speaking from what I've read, but yeah, I get your point. I think what you're saying is that's something for another day, but until that's addressed specifically to part-time legislators who are under the employment of someone else,
Absolutely.
it is a floodgate that we have to address.
Absolutely. And again, I'm confident that this body will do that.
If I may, I apologize, but we addressed that, and it's our intention, and we wanted to first make notice here during the public hearing that we were going to submit an amendment and add to it. There's a system in place for that. So with every single board member, and if you look at every committee report we go through the confirmation process, and every appointed official, they fill out basically a non-collusion act and display all their conflicts. So we've seen the system in place already with board members that they have to disclose all of their business interests. So we were going to submit an amendment to adopt that document and make that part of the requirements annually with the financial disclosures for senators. And everyone's correct here. Transparency is the key to all of that, and disclosing everything up front and addressing any potential conflicts, I think would solve any of the problems in the future. So we do intend to submit the amendment to add that and attach that as an amendment, and also as an exhibit to use that process and that form that's currently in place. At that time, the bill was already submitted. So again, the part-time legislature is submitted to the body, and this is not the Fernando, Esteves, or Tommy Morrison idea of the part-time legislature. This is something simple and a working product that it is my hope that with the input of the community and my colleagues that we can make this into the very best product that we can all be proud of and pass at the end of the day. Well, thank you, Mr. Panola.
Thank you very much.
Senator Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point in time, the only conflict I'm concerned with, and I like to address this to the party official, is when one branch has overextended influence over another branch of government. And so my question to you, Mr. Panola, whether it's, as a private citizen or as a member of the GOP, is this. What is your opinion relative to full-time classified employees of the judiciary, a third and equal branch of government, serving as a senator in the Guam legislature?
Well, again, if you move forward with this bill and it passes and becomes law, I think that anybody, regardless of the branch of government that they serve in, if they are elected, duly elected by the people of Guam, I think we abide by that election and we allow them to serve our people. The most important aspect of this whole conversation is the people of Guam. Not me as a party official, you as elected official, but the voice of the people of Guam. They make that decision. They tell us how to run this legislature and this government. We work for them. So that would be my response.
Any further questions from Mr. Panola?
Further, Mr. Chair.
Senator Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Panola, for taking the time to be here and provide testimony. With your support for Bill 60,
you know, it's always our goal. If any legislation introduced by this body is certainly with the help of our colleagues, to make the bill or the legislation much better, and hopefully get their support. For some reason this measure doesn't pass, would you support putting this before the people to allow them to decide in converting this legislature to a part-time legislature?
Yes, sir. I would definitely support that. Again, we are servants of the people of Guam, and we should allow them the voice, the opportunity to voice that opinion. Wouldn't mind seeing it in the election as a referendum if that needs to be done. Again, for me, we're going down this road. I'd like to see that, you know, as much participation from the people of Guam in this decision. This is going to have major impact on how we as a government operate. And so, you know, that's a big concern, that our people are involved at every step of the way.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad our colleagues are here, and that's what's very important about this public hearing process, is also to hear our colleagues provide their concerns, and therefore the author, myself, and the body will make the necessary revisions, amendments that will make the bill much better and satisfy their concerns. But I thank you for sharing your thoughts that we also have companion legislation with Bill 61 that is identical, but the only difference is we put this before the people. So I'm glad we're able to put this on the record. Thank you.
You're welcome. And again, you know, the people of Guam have elected you, and they have full faith in this legislature, in this body, to make the right decision.
Senator Addo with a follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one last question. And,
Sure.
And Mr. Pinalla, I think you're a unique witness because you're here as a party official.
Yes, sir.
Now, I just want to make it clear in my mind, you indicated earlier that you support the concept of a part-time legislature if it is to mitigate, if to mitigate basically any reduction in pay and the salary levels of the senators.
Yes, sir.
But if that does not come to pass, that then the salary level of the senators remains where it is, does that then, is it then accurate to conclude that therefore you would not support?
No, sir. Absolutely, quite the opposite. I've, again, have gone on record. I would like to see you get paid as much as you can get paid legally by law for the job that you do. I think that your pay should be as high as possible, commensurate with, you know, your colleagues serving in the United States. You shouldn't be paying yourself any lower than you are now, or the CNMI. CNMI legislatures are getting a lot more pay than you are. And look at the workload you're doing compared to what they're doing. So if you're going to get paid more, I'm all for that, because you, again, people, I'm not just, you know, talking personally to you up here, but the person that serves in that position, that's a lot of work. A lot of people may not realize the kind of work that you do on a daily basis. I do as a party official.
So I guess I'm just one more time, and
Sure.
I'll stop. That the support, your support of a part-time legislature is contingent upon what that salary level is of the senators. So if the current salary level of the senators remains as it is, or maybe even increase as you suggest, that therefore a part-time legislature really then is not needed because there's nothing to mitigate. Is that a fair logic?
I understand where you're going with your question, Senator, and, you know, I'm trying my best to answer you.
Okay.
If the legislature is going to pursue a part-time legislature, and you're pursuing in the bill a lower salary, then I agree that yes, you move forward with a part-time legislature. This would allow people in our community who have other professions to participate, you know, in the election process and get elected as a public official. If you're going to pay yourself more, I don't have a problem with that. If you're a full-time legislature and you raise your pay, I don't have a problem with that either.
Thank you.
Sure.
One more, is this in line with Senator Al? Okay, Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Pinella, for your time and for your testimony and for your service to the people of Guam as a party official. In Bill 60-34, Section 3, which is the amendment of Section 1106, Chapter 1, Title 2, it details the pay for this part-time legislature measure. So senators will receive a stipend of $1,000 a month and $140 per diem per session day. What are your thoughts about that number?
Well, that's consistent with part-time legislatures as well. So I don't have a problem with that. I think Senator Esteves and the bill writer and the co-sponsor are looking at models that are being used today. And so, again, I don't have a problem with that model.
Okay, I just see a huge discrepancy between what you're describing with a full-time legislature at $85,000 a year, or what you described in the CNMI or in other places where senators are paid above and beyond that, and then this section of $1,000 a month and $140 per diem per session day. How are you able to kind of reconcile that difference?
Well, if this is the only job that you're going to have is work for the legislature, and you're only earn $12,000 a year, then that is kind of tough to attract the talent pool that we as a Republican Party are looking for. It's very tough to look for a person to do that. If you move to a part-time legislature, who would take that pay? It would be a professional, somebody who could, take a second job, who had another form of income. So that's how I would resolve that.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Castro.
Mr. Pinalla, first of all, I don't mean to put you in a tough spot, but in full disclosure, we're neighbors, and since you claim to wear the veil of the Republican Party, I guess you're going to have to earn it at least this afternoon. In this discussion, I have to ask you, let's assume we move forward with a part-time legislature. And as I interpret my role as a senator to be, there are three components, right? You're establishing policy, fiscal or otherwise. Then there's the power of oversight. And then, given all things considered, where we live and what we do in this specific way of life that we live, there's the need to serve our constituency, and those are unique, right, in many different ways, and they're varied. If we were a part-time legislature, Mr. Pinalla, which one of the three do we give up?
You wouldn't be able to give up any of the three. How much time and how much service you put in is going to really be entirely up to you. You are going to be held to the same standards from the people of Guam as you are right now, whether you're part-time or full-time. The people of Guam are going to look to you to pass good legislation, to interact within the community, to use the power you have judicially. They are going to look to you, and they will watch every movement you make, and it will be reported on the news, as you all already are aware. What's going to suffer? A lot of things may suffer, I don't know. Maybe nothing will suffer, I don't know. But if you move towards a part-time legislature, as some communities have done, again, the accessibility is going to be that much more limited. And so that could be a very major concern for our people to consider. Because you may be off working and doing your primary job, which you're getting paid for to do so, as opposed to being a legislator. So that could be problematic as well.
And I'll give you my word, this will be my last follow-up question for you, Mr. Pinalla. Just for the record, the part-time legislature, if I'm not mistaken, in Hawaii, they're compensated, I think, at $67,000. And some of those new college grads who just got elected are fine with that. I've had several conversations to that effect. But my follow-up question is, can I get your opinion with respect to the power of oversight? I know that there's a stipend for sessions. What would you suggest in terms of us coming together as a body to conduct oversight or to have public hearings and things other than being formally embodied in a session, so to speak?
Sure, absolutely. You know, that's a good question, and it's one that's difficult to answer, but I'll put it to you this way. It really depends on the product you produce. It really does. If you're putting out good legislation and you're putting out, you know, great pieces of oversight out there in the community, then you should be paid for that. Again, a man's worth, a woman's worth, you know, really depends on how much they toil and how much work they put in. And I believe you should be paid for that. You know, nothing less. I think our people deserve good legislators like yourself.
Any further questions for Mr. Pinala? Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pinal, I have a question for you. Your opinion. We look at the turnout here today, and I want to ask you, in your opinion, do you think it's necessarily because nobody may care about the issue or talking about a part-time legislature, or that most of the people are at work right now?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll be honest with you. I signed leave today.
And so when we think about constituent reach, I think it'd probably be more advantageous to be part-time and be like one of the community and consider what they're going through. Having our public hearings at night and on weekends, just like other citizens work on weekends, we should as well. So I would have to disagree. I think that they would affect constituency reach. I think majority of the population, majority of the taxpayers and voters out there are working daily. And you're right, it would be more incumbent upon the senator to make that time, whether it's a phone call and scheduling an appointment. But to think that the model doesn't work would be inaccurate, because it's widely used in not only municipalities, but 40 of the 50 states and a couple of the territories. Also, it's in my opinion, you know, realistically, that the actual workload, majority of that is taken care of by their staff. I think there's maybe a handful of senators ever who actually wrote their own bills. And so anyways, thank you for the question.
All right.
Any further questions for Mr. Pinala? Sir, before I dismiss you, I just wanted to clarify, are you testifying as a member of, as an official member of the Republican Party?
Yes, I am.
So does your testimony, is that an official reflection of the Republican Party's position on the measure?
Yes, it is.
So just to recap, one, the official position of the Republican Party is that they support higher pay for senators.
Yes.
Two, the official position of the Republican Party is not only they support higher pay for senators, but they support a part-time legislature as reflected in the bill?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pinal.
You're welcome.
This will conclude the testimony that we have received for Bill 60-34.
Mr. Chairman?
We'll go ahead and continue to receive testimony on the measure via email through senatornicolas@gmail.com. You can submit written testimony as well to the legislature's member.
Mr. Chairman, I think the executive director of the legislature might have had some concerns. I would have no problem addressing publicly. I think they're valid concerns.
I have not received any communications from any other individuals who have indicated a willingness to testify. But if anything comes in via correspondence, we'll go ahead and transmit it to you.
Was a letter sent to you from him with the BBMR note?
This is with respect to the fiscal note. On to the next item on the agenda, we have Bill 72-34, introduced by myself, an act to add a new section 22438 to Article 4, Chapter 22, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring that executive branch agencies of the government of Guam amortize payments of municipal leases into equal monthly installments throughout the fiscal year, except when such amortization schedule would cause a violation of an indenture such that it would negatively impact the credit rating of the government of Guam. This bill was introduced by myself, and in a nutshell, what it would intend to do is, for example, with respect to the lease of the Teton High School, the payment for that comes in a single lump sum of $7 million in November. What this bill would do is it would instead cause those kind of payments to be amortized over the entire year. So instead of paying $7 million up front in one shot, you'd be paying about $600,000 a month from out of the government of Guam to the owner of the facility from which we are leasing. And the purpose of this is to help improve our cash flow, because we hear on a regular basis that money comes in at different times in the year. And so when money comes in at different times of the year, if we have these huge payouts and they don't correspond with the influx of cash resources to pay them, it creates strain on the government. By amortizing these kind of large payouts over the course of 12 months, we smooth the outflow, and that will in turn allow us to be able to manage our cash flow basis better. So the bill intends to cause those leases to be amortized on a monthly basis, provided that amortization would not negatively impact any contractual obligations that may impact the credit rating of the government of Guam. So that is the intent of Bill 72-34. We do not have any testimony submitted at this time. However, we will go ahead and continue to receive any at senatornicholas@gmail.com or transmitted in writing to the legislature's mailroom. This will conclude the hearing on Bill 72-34 and take us next to Resolution 76-34, also introduced by myself, relative to respectfully requesting that Congresswoman Madeline Bergalio pursue via the United States Treasury and the Department of Interior a payment schedule of Section 30 reimbursements that will improve the government of Guam's cash flow position by amortizing such payments in quarterly installments over the fiscal year, beginning with the third quarter of fiscal year 2017. The intent of this resolution, similar to the bill I just described, is to also once again improve the cash flow of the government of Guam. This time, we're trying to smooth out what's coming in. Normally, Section 30 comes in a big chunk at the end of September, and between the fiscal year starting in October all the way up until that September period, we're waiting in between. What this resolution would do is it would actually break up Section 30 payments into quarterly installments so that we would have a steadier stream of cash flow coming into the government. And importantly, we time it for the third quarter of this fiscal year. And so based on our last special session, we are looking at $68 million coming in Section 30. This would actually accelerate 1/4 of that. So by the third quarter of this fiscal year, by July 1st, we should be receiving if this passes and if Treasury so obliges, a $17 million payment by July 1. That would allow us to be able to pay out tax refunds faster, to be able to pay vendor payments faster, to be able to pay all of our obligations a little bit quicker. Every 3 months after that third quarter, we will get another $17 million payment. $17 million on a quarterly basis comes out to $68 million a year. So in October 1, January 1, May 1, July 1, we will be getting a $17 million influx of cash via Section 30 if we pass this resolution. It would help to solve our tax refund issue now, and it would smooth over our cash flow going forward to allow for our people to be able to avail of those resources on a more regular basis. We do not have anyone who signed up for Resolution 76-34. We will go ahead and continue to receive testimony via senatornicholas@gmail.com or through the legislature's mailroom, and that will conclude our hearing on Resolution 76-34. Lastly, we have Resolution 107-34, also introduced by myself, relative to establishing a Wheels to Work program to provide Guam Regional Transit Authority bus passes to individuals who are unemployed and are actively seeking work, subject to availability of funds, paid by voluntary contributions from senatorial office budgets, and to direct the Executive Director of Legislature in Guam to establish policies and procedures for the program. Basically, what Resolution 107 will do is it will have the Executive Director set up a program by which any senator, on a voluntary basis, if they have the resources available, can go ahead and purchase bus passes in order for unemployed individuals to avail of them in order to find work. This will allow for us to encourage frugality within our offices if we are able to manage that, and if we are, then to be able to put it towards this program. It's one of those things where it would be something good to start, see how it works, and if it works out well, I'm sure we would get more support behind it, and it's one of those measures that would be more dependent upon the individual senator having the ability to contribute. So we wouldn't be adding a new social program onto the liabilities of the general fund. This will be out of existing resources that are already committed to Legislature and funded entirely by office budgets that are able to render the savings necessary to pay for the passes. We have no individuals who signed up for Resolution 107-34, and so that will go ahead and conclude the hearing on this measure. Again, we can receive testimony at senatorsnickers@gmail.com or through the legislature's mailroom. I'd like to thank my colleagues for attending the public hearing on these measures, and we will go ahead and adjourn this hearing at 2:46 in the afternoon. Si Tuos Maasi.